ladies and gentlemen, it's Mrs. D. Today we're going to talk about photosynthesis, and this really relates to cellular respiration. They are interchangeable. They are very important. One's products are the reactants of the other. Alright, so let's dive in. So, where does energy in food ultimately come from? So when you eat a cheeseburger, where did that energy really come from? Well, if you guessed the sun, you were right. All energy does come from the sun. I know it's a very strange topic to think, how does my cheeseburger come from the sun? But we're going to talk through that process now. So in photosynthesis, it provides the energy for almost all living things by being at the foundation of most food chains. So here's a really great picture. When the sun lets its rays onto Earth, grasses and other plants use the energy from the sun to make ATP, which then produces its glucose. So it uses both water and carbon dioxide with light energy to produce glucose and then oxygen as a byproduct. So when a deer eats grass, it is getting the energy that originated from the sun that is now glucose in the plant, and it is using that energy in its body to do cellular respiration. And we just learned about cellular respiration, which is the breakdown of glucose into ATP. When the lion eats the deer, it is getting glucose that originated from the grass with the energy that originated from the sun. And again, it's going to use that glucose in cellular respiration to produce its ATP. So the energy from the sun is transferred through all living things, and it is a continuous transfer until it leaves the system. So the sun's energy is captured by these special organelles called chloroplasts, and there's a pigment in there called chlorophyll, and that is the main pigment that is going to absorb the sunlight. So here's some nice pictures. We see a leaf. Inside of leaf is leaf sections. Then there are these special cells called mesophyll cells. In there are these chloroplasts, and you see the chloroplasts that look like this. And in the chloroplasts are granomes and thylakoids. And in those thylakoids are the chlorophyll pigments. Now the chloroplast is where the photosynthesis actually occurs. So how do we use light's energy? Well, not all wavelengths of light are absorbed equally. Some are absorbed more than others. Red and blue are absorbed more, and green is really not absorbed at all because it is actually reflected back, which is why plants look green. And if you look at this apple, we see the red being reflected. So in this case, the red would be absorbed the lowest because it's being reflected the most. On this graph right here, we see a lot of absorption happening again in the blues and in the reds. So that's where the most absorption comes from. Where the green, the absorption levels are very low because most of it is being bounced back and reflected, so the plants look green. So in general, light energy is captured and used to eventually make a molecule of glucose, which is food for the plant, which then in turn turns into food for us. So sunlight comes in to the plant with some carbon dioxide and water. What we get out that's the most important is glucose, but we also get out oxygen, which humans would use to do cellular respiration. So remember last time we looked at a basic version of cellular respiration. Well, now let's look at photosynthesis. So solar energy is stored in the chemical bonds of ATP, the main energy molecule of living things. So we talked about ATP being the currency for the cell. So solar energy comes in, it produces a little bit of ATP, then ATP goes on to make glucose, and that glucose is then the energy holder or transfer. It is what holds the energy until the body or the plant breaks it down in cellular respiration. So we see the solar energy coming in, it produces a chemical energy called ATP, and ATP makes glucose, which remember is C6H12O6, and that glucose is what gets broken down in cellular respiration. So why do photosynthesis? What is our main idea? In general, energy is captured and stored in a molecule of glucose via ATP. Glucose is our storage molecule because we don't need to use all the ATP at once. We want something to store it in case we can't make as much ATP for a little bit. So glucose acts as that storage unit. Water and carbon dioxide are necessary for plants to perform photosynthesis, and oxygen and glucose are products. Now, if you remember back to cellular respiration, oxygen and glucose are the reactants, while water and carbon dioxide are the products. So this is sort of the reverse of cellular respiration. Again, here is a lovely equation that, yes, you must have memorized. So solar energy, or light energy, plus water, which a plant takes up through its roots, plus carbon dioxide that a plant absorbs through its leaves, are the reactants, or what a plant starts with to do photosynthesis. In return, the plant gets glucose and then the product of O2. Now, does a plant use oxygen? Yes, it does. When it does cellular respiration, it actually needs oxygen. But during photosynthesis, the oxygen is given off as a byproduct, and those are the products, or what we end with in photosynthesis. Okay, so we start, a plant takes its light energy, it absorbs it with the chlorophyll in its chloroplast, water, which it takes up from its roots, and it's carbon dioxide, which it gets from absorbing in the air. What we get in return is glucose, which is the most important product, and oxygen. There are 3 stages to photosynthesis. Here is a very lovely photo of the stages. So stage 1, this is the light reaction, meaning we need light, or the plant needs light in order for this reaction to work. So it occurs during the daytime. The reactants are light and water. So this is when the plant uses the light, or sun energy, and the water, that's a reactant. We get the product O2, which the plant then eliminates out of the system, and ATP. The ATP does not leave the chloroplast. Instead, it moves on. Okay, it moves on and continues to stage 2. In stage 2, we have something called the Kelvin cycle, or the dark reaction, meaning we do not need the sun's light in order for this reaction to occur. The reactants, meaning the things that go in, are the ATP that we started with, that we ended with in stage 1, and the CO2. And that CO2 is going to be absorbed by the plant leaves, and that's another reactant. The product of this one is glucose. And this is the very important product that would be then used in cellular respiration. So most of the glucose that is produced by photosynthesis is put into storage for later use. So it might make cellulose, it can make a whole slew of things with the glucose it just made. In the picture, we see how light energy plus carbon dioxide and water turns into oxygen and glucose. And in respiration, that those products become the reactants, and the sugar plus the oxygen turns into carbon dioxide and water. Cellular respiration is where it will be broken down to produce ATP for metabolic work and growth, and that's just cellular or chemical reactions. An overview, glucose molecules are joined together to produce the sugars and starches for long-term energy storage. So they become the carbohydrates that we've been talking about. And remember, glucose is a building block, or the monomer of a carbohydrate. When the cell does work, the glucose is broken down and releases the stored energy in cellular respiration. And so when it breaks these bonds and breaks apart the glucose, we get the ATP. And it hopefully will be aerobic respiration, so we can get lots of ATP from it. Cellular respiration review, the energy stored in glucose is converted to ATP. Okay? If you would like a video, this is sort of a funny video about photosynthesis. We will watch it in class. It is one of my favorites. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please make sure to ask. I hope you have a wonderful